Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. For me, this type of an audience of those who are shaping a nation and those who are getting ready to shape a nation is the perfect conversation. Because I'm clear that at any time ever in human history, the ability of a small team of people to change the course of history has never been like this before. Individuals have more power today than the kings and the queens, the presidents had 20, 30 years ago in terms of access to capital, access to computation, access to information, access to knowledge, access to technologies. It's never been more powerful. And ultimately, what is most critical isn't those things. It's the passionate, dedicated human mind. It's the individual who says, I refuse to let this go on any further. This is where I want to change the world. In fact, I'm working on right now something, you've heard of the giving pledge from Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and great, but what I'm working on right now is what I'll be calling the impact pledge. Where I really want to see is families and individuals who make a commitment to say, this is the impact I'm going to have. I'm going to wipe out water scarcity in this country. I'm going to make the lives of women and girls safe in this country. I'm going to change healthcare in this way. We have the ability now to call our shot, to say this is the impact I'm going to make, and make a public statement of that impact, and then go and make it happen. So we can talk more about that. But I want to talk about the impact of exponentials and where we are. I'm going to hit on 4 subjects. A few of you heard me speak yesterday, so we'll be a little bit of expanded in a few different areas. But the fact that we are transforming what used to be scarce into abundance, that we are in a rapid period of disruption. We are disrupting the old way of all industries, not in 50 years, as you said, but the next 20 years. It's evolve or die. I want to talk about a few of the technology highlights. I want to talk about sort of bold thinking, the ability that we have to impact 1 billion lives, and the notion that we shouldn't be shooting for anything less than that. And we think that the world is getting worse and worse and worse, while by almost every standard, it's gotten extraordinarily better. Not every, but almost every standard, right? The global income around the world has more than tripled. The human lifespan has more than doubled. We're about to double the human lifespan again. The cost of food has dropped 20-fold over the last century. The cost of energy has dropped hundreds of fold over the last century. The cost of transportation, thousands, and communications, billions of fold. So why have these positive changes been happening? Why now? Why over the last 100 years? It isn't better politicians. We haven't had a hardware upgrade in our brains. It's the impact of exponential technologies. These technologies are transforming the planet, right? If you think about Google or Baidu giving access to information to 7 billion people on the planet, that has transformed the world as something that's free for everybody. So we'll talk more about those things. So, as you beautifully said, scarcity is contextual. And I think about technology as being the force that takes anything that used to be scarce and makes it abundant over and over and over again, which means it takes things that used to be only available to the wealthiest and makes it available to the world. So the analogy I give is, imagine an orange tree filled with oranges, and I go and pluck the oranges from the lowest branches, and once I've plucked everything I can reach, oranges become scarce. Until I invent a piece of technology, called ladder, and now it gives me higher reach, and I'm now able to make oranges abundant again. And we've seen this in energy, right? As we saw our ability to drill down 5 kilometers, and 5 kilometers sideways has opened up oil reserves, and fracking opened up natural gas. But at the end of the day, we're about to open up what is the largest access to energy ever, which is solar. At the end of the day, we have 8,000 times more energy hitting the surface of the earth from the sun than we consume as a species. There is a squanderable abundance of energy from the sun. It's just not all in a usable form yet. But if you look at the numbers in the global growth of solar production and the reduction, the exponential reduction in the costs, the predictions are we're not 15 to 20 years away from providing the majority of all the global energy needs from solar. Wind is ahead right now, but solar will catch up. The World Economic Forum, said that in 30 countries, the cost of solar was cheaper than fossil fuels, right? Coal is dead, period, done. Just this last month, India shut down 37 coal mines, and it just will not recover. Oil and gas will follow in the next 15 to 20 years. We're going to see ourselves going towards an all-electric or majority electric economy, and we can talk about what the implications of that are. Interestingly enough, the poorest countries in the world are the sunniest countries in the world. So for me, and we can discuss this in the Q&A, we're heading towards creating abundance in every single area, where we're heading very rapidly towards a world where the poorest child and the wealthiest child have access to the same health care. The poorest child and the wealthiest child have access to the same education. And should not be something that we think is impossible, right? Because the poorest child and the wealthiest child on Google have access to the same information in the world, right? In fact, the child of the wealthiest or the poorest child here in Brazil has access to the same information as Larry Page at Alphabet on this device. We're democratizing those things. So I talk about and teach in the boardrooms of the Fortune 500 companies or to our graduate students at SU, I talk about the 6 Ds of exponentials. And that anything that becomes digitized, and we're digitizing manufacturing, construction, we're digitizing medicine, finance, we're digitizing everything. Whatever becomes digitized enters a period of slow, deceptive growth. Like if I asked you how many of you had heard about 3D printing 3 years ago, raise your hand. I'm sure a lot of you had heard about 3D printing. How about 10 years ago? Nobody? 20? So it's a 33-year-old technology. Stereolithography, Chuck Hull started stereolithography 33 years ago, and it grew very deceptively until it started disrupting the marketplace and changing how we manufacture rocket engines, cars, buildings, everything. And then these technologies dematerialize, demonetize, and democratize products and services. So let's talk about the disruption that is coming, evolve or die. So here's the challenge. We are all local and linear thinkers. The way that our brains have 100 billion neurons and 100 trillion synaptic connections. And our brains evolved hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago on the savannas of Africa. And back then, the world was local and linear. And so the way that we think, the cognitive biases we have, are local and linear biases. And we don't know how not to think the way we think. But today, the world is global and exponential. Something happens in China or India, you know about it seconds later. Your computers know about it microseconds later. Things are not changing century to century or decade to decade. They're changing year to year, right? Amazon buys Whole Foods, and it changes the economy of food. So this red line is all of us, right? It's us humans. We haven't had a hardware or software upgrade. We are linear thinkers, and we haven't changed much over time. This yellow line is the technologies that we're using. It's AI, robotics, synthetic biology, communications networks, sensors. All of these things are doubling in power year on year. And the difference between these two lines is disruptive stress. If you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and some kid in the garage comes up with a brand new way to do something, or disruptive opportunity if you're the kid in the garage. And so in my last book, Bold, which I guess translated here as Exponential Opportunities in Portuguese, I talk about the story of Kodak. And so Kodak, those of you In the older generation, remember, this was the centerpiece of all vacations. You would go buy your film, you would take the photos, you would pay for them to be developed, and then you would hope that one or two photos came out. It was a great gimmick. And so Kodak is a $28 billion company. It's at the top of its game in 1996. And what most people don't realize is that 20 years earlier, Kodak had invented the digital camera in their labs. A guy named Steven Sasson had come up with the digital camera, and ultimately, when he brings this digital camera into the boardroom and says, here it is, the future of Kodak, the board members ignore it. And they say, that's a toy for kids. We're Kodak. We make beautiful, high-resolution images. This is 0.01 megapixels. And besides, we're in the paper and chemicals business. And the challenge is that Kodak forgot what business they were really in. They weren't in the paper and chemicals business. They were in the business of delivering memories for people. And so by 2012, Kodak goes bankrupt, put out of business by the very technology that they had invented. But they didn't understand the potential. And it's so hard to change your vision, right? Digital camera was a cost center for Kodak. Paper and chemicals was their profit center. And to make change is so difficult. To disrupt yourself is so difficult. But in the same year that Kodak goes bankrupt, put out of business by the very technology that they had patented, another company also in the digital imagery business, a company called Instagram, gets acquired by Facebook for $1 billion. But they have 13 employees. Right? And so we're going to see this a lot, and I call it the new Kodak moment, where linear thinking companies that refuse to change are disrupted by exponential organizations, exponential entrepreneurs who figure out new business models, how to reinvent an industry. So a lot of this exponential change is riding on top of what's called Moore's Law. Okay, who's heard of Moore's Law? Can I just get a sense? Okay, so a lot of you. This is Gordon Moore, who in 1958 co-founded Intel. And their goal was to take transistors and integrate them onto integrated circuits on silicon. And between 1958 and 1965, Gordon Moore, who was heading the research, noticed something. He noticed that the number of transistors on a piece of silicon was roughly doubling every 12 to 8 months for the same amount of money. And he said something in this paper. He said, this kind of doubling is likely to continue. And it's continued for 50 years. And I want to give you a way of thinking about this. So this is the first integrated circuit. It's a horizontal and vertical transistor, about a half inch, a centimeter or so across. This is their first commercial product, the Intel 4004 2300 transistors, $1 each. And fast forward 45 years, this is an Intel Core i7 processor with 14 billion transistors, less than a millionth of a penny each. All right, so when you think that the world is getting faster and that we're able to do much more than ever before, to contact or anybody on the planet, know anything on the planet, this is why it's a 330 billion-fold price performance increase. This is what's driving this massive exponential change. Here's another way to look at this change. In 1956, this was a 5 megabyte hard drive for $120,000, and if you happen to have your cargo airplane, you could move it from office to office. And we noticed this when, in 2005, it's 25 times more memory for 1,000th the price. But did you notice when this happened, where 9 years later, it's 128 gigabytes now, 1,000 times more memory for the same price? Right on schedule. And here's the point, it's not slowing down. Every time we hit a barrier of some type, there is a breakthrough that allows us to continue. So I'm an investor and an advisor to a nanotechnology company that's working on a billion-fold memory increase, right? All of Google's data centers on a sugar cube, right? So it's insane. It's crazy, and yet it's happening. So let's talk about some of these exponential technologies. Artificial intelligence, obviously, is probably the most powerful that's transforming our world and becoming invisible in the fabric of our world. You can think of AI from HAL, from 1969 movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. You can think of it as Siri or Google Now or Amazon Echo, Alexa, or I prefer Jarvis. Right? So Jarvis is something that we're all going to have. We are all going to have an AI that we wear, that is around us, an AI shell that we give permission to this AI to listen to every conversation we have, to read our emails, to listen to our phone calls, to measure the blood chemistry we have going on. Because as you give that AI permission, the benefits are so huge that AI is monitoring the health of your body, not once a month or once a week, every minute of the day. And whenever it perceives a small iteration, right? So I'm a pilot. I have a SR-22 and a Citation Mustang. I have a Model S and a Model X Tesla. I love those cars. And those vehicles, those four vehicles, have hundreds of microprocessors, hundreds or thousands of sensors measuring everything going on all the time. And when anything is out of a little of aberration, I know about it instantly. But what about for us, right? For many of us, our refrigerators are better wired than we are. And so, but that's going to change in the next 5 years, right? Huge investments going on right now by my companies, by Google, by Amazon, by Facebook, by Apple, by Samsung. All these companies are investing very heavily into biometric sensors. And so we're all going to be measuring what's going on in our bodies all the time. And we're going to change the entire healthcare industry. All right. Last subject is bold thinking. And this is for you as CEOs and for you as philanthropists. You know, moonshot thinking, bold thinking is going 10 times bigger where the rest of the world is going 10% bigger. And this has been a world of 10%. We've all gotten to where we are by 10%. It's working Friday nights and Saturday nights. It's 10% more revenue, 10% lower prices, 10% more impact. But I want to talk about this idea of being able to go 10 times bigger, not 10% bigger. And it's a notion of changing the game. It's looking at crazy ideas, right? So you talk about massive philanthropy. I think there's been no bigger impact philanthropically in the world than Google, right? Giving access, democratizing access to knowledge in the world. Amazing. And we can do great for humanity and do amazing financially as well. There's an alignment that is now more possible than ever before. I'd like to just take a second and talk about some of the impact work I do at the X Prize Foundation. So we run an organization that creates large-scale global competitions. And we say, I don't care where you went to school, what you've ever done. If you solve this problem, you win $10 million, $30 million. We create a very clear set of rules. So the first X Prize I ever launched was for private spaceflight. I wanted to go to space myself. I gave up a NASA getting me there, and I organized a $10 million purse. I said, I'm going to give $10 million to the first person who can build a spaceship who can carry me and a friend to space. It had three seats, a pilot and 2 paying passengers. And that was one in 2004. Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson's commercialized that since. And now, since then, we've been launching X Prizes. We launch a number of prizes. We're about to launch one with the Chilean mining industry on zero waste mining. I'd love to find out what should we be launching with the Brazilian industry or Brazilian philanthropists here. What are the challenges that you would like to principally solve? And we've launched $125 million of prizes. We have another, this number is about $250 million of prizes. And it's about crowdsourcing solutions and saying, I don't know who in the world is going to solve this, but I know somebody can. And it's not going to be the traditional players. So we just announced in India a water abundance X Prize. India is very humid. And so this is a prize that says take the water out of the air and give a family 20 liters of clean drinking water for 2 cents a liter. Right? So this is about giving water to anybody and everybody. If you go to this website and enter your email, my server will send you a copy of those slides automatically. We're probably running way over time, but I'd love to take some question and answers if we could. All right, thank you.